Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Harris County Flood Control District's virtual community engagement meeting to discuss the White Oak Bayou federal project. This virtual community meeting is being offered by the Flood Control District to continue to share vital information with the community during this period when in-person public meetings have been suspended due to safety concerns from the COVID-19 pandemic. My name is Sheldon Brigham. I'm with the Flood Control District's communications team. I'm joined tonight by a team of Flood Control District leadership and subject matter experts to ensure we continue to keep you up to date on these important flood mitigation projects in your community. We are also joined by staff from area elected officials' offices and community associations. We're so glad to see all the community engaged in this project, and we look forward to continuing to share updates and keeping all of you in the community involved. So here's how everything will work this evening. We're going to start with a presentation to share information about the Flood Control District and about the White Oak Bayou federal project. The presentation will be followed by a virtual question and answer session with Flood Control District team members. You'll be able to submit comments and questions through the website or by phone. Now, any comments not addressed during the Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the comment period. Instructions on how to participate in the virtual open house are included on the slides. They're on the virtual meeting webpage and the Flood Control District website. Now, please note that this meeting is being recorded and will be placed on the district's YouTube channel in the next few days. All meeting materials will be available for download on our website. I will also share a reminder about these instructions when we reach the Q&A portion of the meeting. We will now transition to Gary Zika, the Federal Projects Department Manager. He's going to share information about the Flood Control District and then more about this project. Gary, over to you.
Thank you. Special thanks for all of you joining us tonight. In this presentation, we're going to give you a brief overview of the specific project. But before we do the project specifics, we want to share some information about Harris County Flood Control District. Harris County Flood Control District is a special purpose district created by the Texas legislation 1937 in response to the floods that hit the Houston area in 1929 and 1935. The Harris County Flood Control District was created to serve as a local partner to leverage federal funding for flood damage reduction projects. Our mission has greatly expanded over 80 years with billions of dollars in infrastructure improvements in the ground. While we are a separate entity from Harris County, the Harris County Commissioners Court serves as our governing body. The mission of Harris County Flood Control District is to provide flood damage reduction projects that work with appropriate regard for community and natural values. One of the most difficult challenges we face in constructing effective projects are sensitive to community and natural values in a highly urbanized area. Harris County includes 22 main watersheds totaling approximately 1,800 square miles and more than 2,500 linear miles of channel. The 2,500 miles is the approximate distance from New York to California. Each watershed has its own unique characteristics and needs. Tonight, we're looking at the White Oak Bayou watershed indicated by the red star on the slide. Our area is flood prone, and here are some reasons why. The area is flood prone to extreme rainfall events such as hurricanes and tropical storms. The area is flat, slow draining topography or landscape, and the area has clay soils that do not absorb excess rainfall quickly. The Harris County Flood Control District works with other agencies and shares jurisdiction over the flooding issues in Harris County. This slide illustrates the shared jurisdiction. Inside neighborhoods, as shown on the left side of the illustration, storm sewers and roadside ditches collect stormwater runoff and start the process of moving it away from the streets and the homes. Storm sewers and roadside ditches are the responsibility of the underlying municipality and Harris County engineering and unincorporated parts of the county. The larger bayous and channels that take the collected stormwater and move it through our drainage system to Galveston Bay are the responsibility of Harris County Flood Control District. This is shown on the right side of the illustration. In the middle is the stormwater detention basin, sometimes constructed by Harris County Flood Control. When the storm sewers are increased, this creates an increase in runoff. Since it's our policy to avoid impacts to properties downstream, detention basins help to safely take in and temporarily store the excess stormwater during heavy rain events. Often we partner with Harris County precincts, utility districts, and others to create recreation amenities such as trails to these basins and along our channels. On August 25th, 2018, the Harris County voters approved the $2.5 billion in bonds for flood risk reduction projects. This vote followed a series of meetings across Harris County and each watershed, which resulted in a list of what is now 181 bond projects. 149 of these 181 projects have been initiated so far, including 7 projects in the White Oak Bayou watershed. A total of more than $680 million in partnership funding has been secured so far to stretch the 2018 bond program even further. The actual timing of each individual project will depend on a variety of factors, including the environmental permitting, right-of-way acquisition, and utility relocation, and in some cases, the requirements of the particular grants. That said, the project lists and project schedules are updated regularly on our website. While the bond was for $2.5 billion, the full cost of every project in the bond tables is almost $5 billion. So we made it clear from the onset that we need funding partners to fully construct the projects in the bond program. As I've mentioned, we've had some success so far, having secured more than $680 million in partner funds. This graphic illustrates the many sources of those partnerships, including federal, state, and local funding that the Flood Control District is working to secure for Harris County. Each agency has its own definition of eligible projects and its own requirements for local match funding, so the Flood Control District works diligently to match projects to the right partnership opportunities. For the White Oak project, we are partnering with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, displayed by the red lines on this slide. Now let's go about the project-specific information on the White Oak federal project. White Oak Bayou is the primary drainage channel in the watershed. It flows from the northwest to the southeast, includes several tributaries, including Little White Oak Bayou, Brickhouse Gully, Coles Creek, and Vogel Creek. The bayou begins near US 290 and Huffmeister and flows 26 miles southeast to its confluence at Buffalo Bayou near downtown. Beginning in the 1960s, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers began work on the White Oak Bayou along an approximately 10.5-mile stretch between its confluence of Buffalo Bayou and upstream to Coles Creek. By the late 1970s, the Corps had proposed a new project to complete its work north of Coles Creek. Congress authorized U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to begin the project through the Water Resource Development Act of 1986. A decade later, Congress allowed the Harris County Flood Control District to be the lead agency on this project. Under Section 211F of the Water Resource Development Act of 1996, the Flood Control District is responsible for the study, design, and construction of the White Oak federal project. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approves and reimburses the Harris County Flood Control District for certain costs on the identified project. Following the Corps' study process, we evaluated over 90 different configurations in order to meet the Corps' study requirements. This included both structural and non-structural components, such as adding stormwater detention basins, the bypass channels, modifying White Oak Bayou itself, and replacing bridges across the White Oak Bayou. Non-structural components we looked at include paying to elevate structures adjacent to the bayou and acquiring property adjacent to White Oak Bayou. Eventually, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers approved the Harris County's Flood Control District recommended project to construct 6 new stormwater detention basins, the Jersey Village bypass channel, and modifications of the White Oak Bayou itself between Coles Creek and FM 1960. The total estimated cost for the project is $124 million. We've already completed the majority of the work on the federal project, including excavating the new stormwater detention basins at Fallbrook, the Ranchstone Detention Basin, Beltway 8 Detention Basin, the 2 basins at Fairbanks North Houston, and at the Hollister and West Little York Road. In addition, the Jersey Village bypass channel has also been completed. Modifications to the White Oak by itself are all that remain for this project. Passage of the Bipartisan Act in early 2018 included funding to complete the White Oak Bayou federal project, as well as projects in the Brays and Hunting Bayou watersheds. As mentioned, the total cost of the project is $124 million. This includes $29 million of flood control district has spent to acquire right-of-way and move utility lines. These costs will not be reimbursed by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Once we've completed the project, the Corps will reimburse us for the remaining $95 million of the project cost. Approximately $50 million of that has been spent on the 6 projects constructed to date. Finishing the White Oak Federal project will take an additional $45 million, which includes the recent completion of the excavation work on the Fairbanks North Houston Detention Basin. What benefits will we see from spending $124 million? Using a 1% rain event, meaning the White Oak Bayou watershed receives 13.2 inches of rain in a 24-hour period, which is the basis of the FEMA's regulatory 100-year floodplain. During this 1% event, models indicate a reduction of the flood-based elevations from a couple of inches to almost 2 feet, depending on where you live along the channel. An additional recreational benefit, the White Oak Bayou Hike and Bike Trail from downtown Houston, which currently ends at the Hollister Stormwater Detention Basin, will be extended to Jones Road, indicated by the green on this map. Once completed, the upstream portion will be maintained by Harris County Precinct 4, except for those sections under the jurisdiction of the mud districts. South of Hollister, the trails inside the city of Houston remain under the jurisdiction of the Houston Parks Board. During construction, in the interest of public safety, all trails along the White Oak Bayou between West Tidwell and FM 1960 will be closed for the duration of the construction period. This includes the bike and pedestrian bridge crossings east of Fairbanks North Houston and at the Alabonson Bridge. There may be some minor traffic delays and occasional lane reductions when construction is taking place near the bridges crossing White Oak Bayou. The remaining construction activities have been broken into 2 separate projects. Today's meeting is about the construction of the 5-mile section from Hollister Street south to the confluence of Coles Creek near West Tidwell, which is expected to begin after the first of the year. Construction of the upstream section from Hollister Street to 1960 is already underway. Both projects should be completed by the end of 2021. In addition to the work of widening and deepening White Oak Bayou, we will also be replacing and modifying the storm drainage pipes that lead into the bayou itself. I will now turn the conversation back over to Sandra to kick off the questions and answers.
All right, thank you, Gary. Before we go into the Q&A session tonight, I want to share a quick reminder that we'd love to hear from you on this project and others that we're rolling out across Harris County. If you have any additional comments or questions throughout the life cycle of this project, or if you'd like to sign up to receive email updates on this project and any others going on in the watershed, please visit hcfcd.org/C14. Community engagement is an important component of the work we do, and we invite your continued participation as this project moves forward. Now, as a reminder, there are 3 ways that you can submit a comment during tonight's session. You can submit a comment on the site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website, hcfcd.org/C14, or you can do so by phone. And that number is 855-925-2801. You'll want to utilize the meeting code 8508. Now, if you are joining us via phone tonight, please press *3 to leave a message. Additionally, I want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the close of the comment period. Now, information from this meeting, as well as a recording of the live stream, will be available on the Flood Control District's website, and you'll also find that on our YouTube channel as well. Now, joining Gary Zika for our Q&A session tonight is Jennifer Hobbs. And now it's time to take some of your questions this evening. Our first question will be for Jennifer, And Jennifer Ray is concerned about cyclist and pedestrian safety and is asking if there are any plans to build pedestrian bridges between Gessner and Fairbanks North Houston. If not, how will cyclists from the north side of the bayou cross over to the bike trail? And similar to Ray's concern, someone is wondering if the hike and bike trail will be continuous or if they will be extended. So a lot to unpack there for you, Jennifer.
All right, thanks for the question. So as part of this project, we aren't building any pedestrian bridges. This project, we are connecting some of the existing trails. Most of the trail work is being done on our upstream section, which is underway right now. That makes more of the connections. A lot of our connections here have more to do with the Hollister Basin. But as far as pedestrian bridges go, as we're not going to be building any, Harris County Engineering is actually in the process of designing one near DeSoto. So there's one right there in the Mud District. I believe it's Mud District 9 is going to be building another one near West Road. So there are a couple of other pedestrian bridges on the way that's going to be connecting the north to the south.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our next question is for Gary. And Gary, Patty is asking why homes are being bought that never flooded.
For the federal project, most of the homes that were bought were along the bayou itself, and all those were deep in the floodplain. They're literally their backyards of the bayou. All the homes that I'm aware of have all flooded in the past, not just usually once, but numerous times. Some of the detention basins years ago that we did purchase might have had a few homes on there that didn't flood, but the majority of the homes for the federal project are homes that flooded. There are other projects that flood control is doing in the area, in this watershed, as I mentioned before. There's other bond projects in that area. There may be some homes that are being purchased for those projects that may not have flooded, but normally our projects are are in the floodplain, and it's not the intent, but there's certain areas that we need or certain properties that we need in order to make the projects that efficient for the reducing the risk of flooding.
Thank you, Gary. Our next question is for Jennifer. It's concerning street flooding in neighborhoods. Will the channel improvements have any effect on this?
So as Gary mentioned in one of our previous slides, as far as jurisdiction when it comes to flood control versus city municipality or a MUD, our projects are primarily concerning the channels, and you can see that on the right of your screen. So our main purpose of this project is to reduce flood risk along the channel and through the channel. Now, you could see some benefit in your streets from this project, but likely a lot of that has to do with the municipal drainage. So I encourage you, if you're experiencing these sorts of issues, to contact your local municipality who oversees the storm drainage pipes along your road.
Thank you, Jennifer. Gary, we have someone saying they received an invitation to this meeting as well as one about Inwood, and they're asking if this project is related to the Inwood Forest Detention Project.
Okay, the Inwood Forest is a detention facility on the city of Houston property. It's the old golf course, the Inwood Forest Golf Course. They're two separate projects. We've been coordinating with them, so the work that we're doing along the bayou there's an interface between us and the two projects, so it's a different project. We're not going to go through the details of that project in this meeting. We're talking about the channel work that we've got to do on the federal project, and the meeting next week will be about the detention basin facility. So you really need, if you want to know about the detention facility, you need to attend that meeting also.
Thanks, Gary. And we also received a comment that concrete trails are great for cyclists, but hard on runners' knees. Can you tell us what materials the trails will be made of?
Yes, we're basically the trails on this section that we're looking at are going to be made out of concrete, which is similar to what the Houston Parks Board is maintaining from the Coles Creek up to Hollister now. We'll continue that same concrete material throughout the reach of our project.
Thank you, Gary. Jennifer, this next one is for you, and we received a question about environmental considerations on this project. What is being done to protect wildlife that live in and along the bayou?
Great question. So not just with this project, but with all flood control projects, we have to do environmental due diligence, which includes checking the area for any threatened and endangered species and following any other environmental regulations as set forth by the U.S. Army Corps and other environmental agencies. And if we were to find anything that could be affected by the project, we would have to take all the steps and mitigation efforts to make sure all of those environmental measures are put into place and everything's protected.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. Gary, there are rumors circulating about plans for a detention basin near Antoine. How will that affect flood damage reduction in this area?
Yes, as I mentioned before, there are other bond projects in the White Oak Watershed. There is a detention basin on the bond list right to the east of the Antoine. There's also one further to the west, but I think that's the one the person's referring to. Those detention basins really stand alone. The federal project has the detention basins that have already been constructed at Hollister, Fairbanks, North Houston, the Beltway, and then the two up at Ranchstone and Fallbrook. Those are the federal detention basins. All the other detention basins are just supplementing, helping reduce the risk of flooding in the watershed.
All right, thank you, Gary. We're going to go to Jennifer for a question, but Gary, then we're going to come back to you. We want to go over some more project-specific information for folks who are having a little difficulty with that, so I'll let you prepare for that. But Jennifer, we'll take the next question to you, and there is also community concern about construction inconveniences. Can you tell us more about the construction activities, when the work will be performed, and how many dump trucks should folks expect to see?
That's a good question. So as Gary talked about earlier, we have the upstream section, which is from FM 1960 to Hollister going on right now. And this section is from Hollister to Tidwell and Coal Creek. So, with the tight window that the contractor has, we imagine that they're going to have multiple sites along the bayou at all times. We're going to be closing the trails for the safety of the public and for the safety of the contractor to do their work efficiently during the course of the project, so which that's expected to end in the end of 2021. And there will be occasional single lane closures at some of the bridge intersections at the project during the course of it. But for the most part, the roads are going to be open to the public. A lot of it's going to be pedestrian closures that you're going to see more. And then, dump trucks, just as it comes through, it's an excavation project. So I imagine there will be a lot of them, but they will be taking all safety measures that we require.
Thank you, Jennifer. Gary, now we'll go back to you and wanted you to go through some of the project specifics again, please. And we'll have you unmute, Gary.
There we go. So what we're looking at is the federal project is from West Tidwell all the way out to 1960. We've got 6 stormwater detention basins. Those stormwater detention basins, starting on the upstream end, is our Fallbrook Detention Basin, Ranchstone Detention Basin. Then there's one at Beltway 8, what we call the West Belt Detention Basin. We've got 2 cells of detention basins at Fairbanks, North Houston, and then there's another one at the Hollister Basin, Hollister and West Little York. Those are the detention basins for the federal project. There's also a bypass channel around Jersey Village. We call it the Jersey Village Bypass. It's just north of the city, kind of goes around underneath Beltway 8 and down along, not quite along Gessner, but parallel to Gessner. And then there's the channel work, and the channel work extends from West Tidwell all the way up to 1960. That's the remaining work that we've got. We've broken that channel work up into two channel segments, one from Hollister all the way out to 1960, and that's the one that's already started. When we say already started, it literally started this last week. So the contractor's out there already excavating and starting some of the construction activities he has to do. The ones that we're working at today's meeting about is from Tidwell up to Hollister. It's a smaller section. That's why it's going a little bit later than the other section. We hope to have that construction starting after the first of the year. We have to go out to bid and get prices to come in and award that contract. And so that'll happen after the first of the year. We hope to have construction start with all the construction on the channel work to be completed by the end of 2021. And a lot of that depends on weather sometimes. There's a certain amount of weather delays that we have in our contracts, but if it's a really wet time, it's not as good for the contractor. He can't get as much work done. And if it goes the other way, if it's really dry and he gets good conditions, he may go a little faster. But the goal is to be done by the end of 2021.
All right, thank you, Gary. And we have a couple of people asking if there is any other flood mitigation work planned for the White Oak Bayou watershed.
And again, there are other projects. If you go to the website and look under the White Oak Watershed, you'll see that there's other bond projects listed. There's a couple detention basins. Well, actually, there's, I guess, 3 detention basins and some channel work on some of the tributaries. There's some repair work up and down the channel. So there is other work on the White Oak Bayou watershed.
Thank you, Gary. Now, as a reminder, just want to let folks know that there are 3 ways that you can submit a comment about this project during tonight's session or question. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website at hcfcd.org/C14, or you can submit a comment via phone, and that number is 855-925-2801. You'll utilize the meeting code 8508. And if you are joining us via phone tonight, make sure that you press *3 in order to leave a message. Again, I want to let you know that any questions that are not addressed during tonight's Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District, and those will go out after the close of the comment period. Again, this meeting is being recorded, and there will be a live stream that will be available to you. It's going to be on our website, the Flood Control District's website, and it will also be on our YouTube channel. All right. I also have a question for Gary or Jennifer about the construction schedule.
The construction schedule, in general, the upper part of the channel, which has just started recently, the contract is to show them to be done by the end of 2021. And the downstream segment, which is what we're talking about today, from Hollister down to Tidwell, it got to go through the bid process, get it awarded, and we're hoping construction start early next year, with it also finishing by the end of 2021.
Thanks, Gary. Jennifer, Jason is asking when construction will begin on the Bayou through Jersey Village, that portion.
Yes, so that's the portion that's going on right now. So that's the portion that Gary was talking about that's already under contract and the contractor's working on. Now, as I said, there's going to be multiple sites that the contractor is going to be working on, as the project progresses. They have a really tight schedule to meet. So I imagine you'll be seeing a lot of that activity soon. I don't at this time have a specific time schedule of when they will be in a specific area. We don't typically tell the contractor means and methods, but they have to complete it in a certain time frame and to do it safely. So you should be seeing that very, very soon.
Thanks, Jennifer. We have another construction schedule as well, or question rather, but Stephen is thanking us for this meeting. And he wants to know if there is a more specific tentative construction schedule published For example, when might we see work from Jones southward to Sam Houston Tollway or the Tollway southward to Fairbanks North Houston?
We don't typically post those sorts of construction schedules. Gary, do you want to get into more specifics on that one?
Sure. The construction schedules are pretty fluid, and we'd be racing ourselves to death, basically, trying to keep up with what the contractor's schedule is. We have inspectors out in the field that are working with the contractor on a daily basis, and literally schedules change depending on how much rain it is, their materials that they've got coming in, the pipe work. Sometimes it's where the material's going that they're digging out and whether they could get rock in time. And so it's a very fluid situation. And so trying to say, hey, we're going to be on such and such a date, as Jennifer said, we don't have those dates. The contractors, our contract requirement is when he has so many days to finish the project. And his means and methods, how he gets there. If he wants to put in, 20 different crews working all up and down the channel, that's his option, or if he wants to do it with 5. And so we just have to man our inspection to make sure that we're inspecting the work and he's doing it properly. And so that's what our goal is, not necessarily managing him in any way. It's up to him to get the job done.
Thank you, Gary. And make sure you keep your questions coming in. We're going to extend our meeting by looks like 10 minutes tonight. So our next question for Jennifer, D. Haskins is asking, how wide and how deep will the Bayou channel be after the project is complete?
Good question, and it does depend where you are on the channel, but tentatively it's all within our right-of-way limits. So a lot of what this project is making sure that we have a generally the same cross-section throughout from FM 1960 all the way back down to Tidwell. So it ranges about, it could be up to 60 feet wide to 6 to 8 feet deep, just kind of depending on where you are along the channel.
Yeah, I could add a little to that is that what's kind of unique about this particular one is the bypass channel. And so there's a certain amount of water that goes down the bypass channel. And so what goes through the old Jersey Village channel, the White Oak Bayou, is much narrower than what the bypass is. But that's the equivalent of water with the bypass channel, and what goes through the old channel is what you have to have for the channel upstream and downstream. So the channel sections vary along the channel. Whether you're upstream of a detention basin where some of the water is being drawn off during the high rain events or not. So there's not one answer all the way through there. It varies depending on where you're at along the channel.
Thank you, Gary. Thanks, Gary. And can we go back again over the project-specific information for folks who might have missed it this evening?
Sure. You want to put the either slide, one of the overall slides up, and I'll just walk through it. On the upper end of, go one more before that. There you go. So, So the federal project goes from Coles Creek all the way up to 1960. That's the reach that we're looking at. On the upper end, we've got 2 detention basins, the Fallbrook Detention Basin and the Ranchstone Detention Basins. Those both are complete to date. Then the next one we've got down is at West Belt Detention Basin, which just is downstream of the Jersey Village. And we've got 2 detention basins or 2 cells at Fairbanks North Houston. They'll both complete also. And then we've got the Hollister Detention Basin at West Little York and Hollister. Those are the detention basins that are all complete and that are part of the federal project. There are other detention basins. There's one out there at the old golf course in Jersey Village. Then there's one down near Vogel Creek. That's what's shown as E504. And then there's 2 smaller ones along the bayou near Tidwell. Those were locally built with Harris County Flood Control money rather than any kind of federal contribution to those projects. And then the channel itself is going to be worked on from Tidwell all the way up to 1960. And that's where we're just talking about the cross section. It varies through there. We've got to make sure that the channel is uniform through that area, trying to keep that water nice flow going through there. And it's also, it includes, we've got the bypass channel around Jersey Village, which is shown by that green loop around where just south of West Road and kind of parallels Gessner. So those are the main components of the federal project. We're not doing any bridges on this project. It was one of the things we did look at during looking at all the alternates during the study phase. We also looked at elevating houses. That didn't work out for the federal government. With a core project, we have to go with what they call a benefit to cost ratio. You have to have a positive benefit to cost ratio, and White Oak has a pretty good benefit to cost ratio. And why that's important, in the past, up until the Bipartisan Act of 2018, we had to compete. Every project that we had to compete nationwide with other projects. And so if somebody had a benefit to cost ratio of 10 on their project, that would get funded before our project would say had a benefit to cost ratio of 5. And so that's why you go through all the different alternates to see what gets you the most bang for the buck, so to speak. And so that's where the benefit to cost ratio comes in. I think I hit most of the highlights. We could talk about the cost. $124 million is the estimated cost. We've already spent $50 million of that building the detention basins and the for the construction and the bypass channel. We still got $45 million to complete. That takes care of the channel section from Tidwell all the way up to 1960. We've got that broken into two components or two different projects. And that $45 million also included money for the detention basin at Fairbanks, North Houston. We had to complete that, which we just completed this last year. And that $45 million also includes the trail extensions. That was one of the things the Corps did look at for a recreational component, which was pretty unique to this project. Normally, the Corps wouldn't look at recreational, but it did come as part of the study that we had to do. And the recreation component is part of that $45 million of extending the trail from Hollister all the way out to Jones Road. And we could talk about the project benefits for the 1% of rain event, which is 13.2 inches of rain for in a 24-hour period. When we run that through the models, this shows the improvements range from a couple inches to up to 1.8 feet. All these numbers are in feet. You might have seen somebody talking about inches. It's all in feet. So it's a tenth of a foot to 1.8 feet. And it just depends on where you're at along the bayou. In the middle section in there is where it gets up to 1.8 feet, which is around Jersey Village, around between Gessner and the bypass channel. Talked a little bit about the hike and bike trails. It's being extended all the way from the Hollister Detention Basin all the way out to Jones Road. The detention basins along the way, Hollister, the two at Fairbanks, North Houston, the West Belt, and the Ranchstone Basin will all have trailhead parking, limited trailhead parking in each one of those. And they'll also have trails that go completely around those detention basins. One of the other ones we're able to work out is that as the trail goes upstream, we'll be able to go underneath most of the roads. It's not 100% on all of them, but we got most of them. I know we're getting underneath Fairbanks, North Houston, Winford. We get underneath Gessner. And then the trail, it does connect underneath Beltway 8 to the trails in Jersey Village. Then we've got to route it up along, we're using the Gessner Road sidewalk on the bridge to go across the bayou and go north up along the bypass channel. We'll be able to go underneath Philippine, and then there's another road we've got to get across and utilize the existing road. We'll go underneath Beltway 8 on the bypass channel, hook up with the Mud District's trail, and it continues to go up. The Mud District is also working on building another bridge, as Jennifer had mentioned earlier, just south or downstream of the West Road area. And there's some trails that are up there that are granite trails. Some of those we'll be replacing. We won't be replacing them all, but a lot of them will get replaced because we're impacting them with the federal, the work on the actual ditch itself. Then you get all the way up to Ranchstone, and there'll be a trail all the way around the Ranchstone Detention Basin, and that will also have a trailhead at that location.
All right, thanks, Gary. We'll take another question now. Mr. Sharon is asking for clarification on the trails. He says there's already a trail in Mud 9 along the bayou, which is constructed of decomposed granite between curbs. There is a belief that a portion of the trail will be relocated in this project. If so, will it be concrete or a rebuild of the current trail material?
Yeah, I think that's the section up near the Ranchstone Detention Basin. There's the section upstream of West Road that will have to be replaced because of the work that we're doing on the channel up there will impact that trail. And when we replace it, we'll be replacing it with a concrete trail to bring it up to the standards that the precinct will be able to maintain. The Rio Grande and the West Road, we will have a trail to go underneath those roads on both of those roads. So that'll be another part of the project, which will help the continuity of the trail to get underneath the roads instead of have to cross the traffic at those where the roads cross the bayou, the trails will be able to go underneath. Similar to what you've got downstream, like at Victory or not at Antoine, but Victory and West Little York and Tidwell, where the trails go underneath. We're going to be doing something similar to that at these upper roads.
And Gary, Rebecca is concerned about the removal of encroachments. What will happen if a fence is not removed?
Okay, the encroachments on the upper end of the project, we've had letters of encroachments go out, and the letters are saying, here's when we've got an encroachment. If there's some question about the encroachments, I think Jennifer's name and number is on that letter, so she'll get the calls. But if you can't get the encroachments removed, if it's a fence, the contractor is instructed to notify the owners of those fence to make sure that they're aware that the fence has to come down, and they'll remove it and stack it neatly on the private property. And then we'll be able to continue with our work doing the channel improvement.
Thanks, Gary. And Casey is asking, what is the estimated time for construction to start south of Little York?
South of Little York, that's the project that we're talking about, the 5 miles from Hollister all the way down to Tidwell. That section, well, again, similar on the upper end. The upper end's a little bit longer one. This one's a smaller section down there. But basically, once we turn it over to the contractor for him to start the construction, we don't tell him you've got to start here or there, or work this way or work that way. We say, you've got the channel, and we want you to be done by the end of 2021. And so it's a tight schedule, and they'll have to work with multiple crews in order to get that work done. So after the first of the year, the contractor should be started. The contractor is starting on the upstream end one. He started right at Hollister, and he's working upstream. We expect him, as he gets going, to have additional crews working throughout the reach at different locations. So,
okay. And let's see, Gary, Michael is curious about the difference between solid red lines along the bayou and hatched red lines, because I thought red hatch lines had work done before, but we're continuing to be worked on. He's just unclear on what each legend symbol means.
we're just kind of breaking it up. The solid red lines is the work for the channel work, and the channel from Tidwell all the way up to 1960 has to be worked on, and that's sort of the two contracts that we're putting out. The dotted red lines are where the trails are presently, or where we're planning on putting new trails in there. So you can see, like on the upper end at the Fallbrook Detention Basin, there are no red dotted lines around the basin, but there is around the Ranchstone. And then that red dotted line kind of follows the bayou on the west side of the bayou. And then it goes along the bypass channel. The other section where some of the channel work has already been done is from Beltway 8 down to past the Hollister Basin. You can see there's a bit of a green section in there with some hatching. That shows that some of that work's already been done on that channel.
Thank you, Gary. Jennifer, Debbie is asking, let's see, about concrete lining. Will the Bayou channel be concrete along the entire length of this project? And Doreen also asking a similar question about the concrete lining.
Yeah, so the bayou will remain an earthen channel. I think there's a couple of bridge crossing locations where there's a bit of concrete underneath there that will remain, which is typical to protect bridge abutments. But overall, yes, the channel's going to remain an earthen channel.
All right, thank you, Jennifer. And just a couple of reminders on how you can submit your questions or comments to us tonight during the session, because we do want to hear from you. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit on the Flood Control District's website, hcfcd.org/C14, or you can do so by phone. That phone number is 855-925-2801. You'll want to utilize the meeting code 8508. And again, if you are joining us by phone tonight, make sure that you press *3 to leave a message. Additionally, I do want to reiterate that any questions not addressed during tonight's Q&A session will receive a response from the Flood Control District after the close of the comment period. And we'll also have a recording of this live stream meeting available on our website, and it'll also be available on our YouTube channel so that you can go back and hear your questions answered or get any clarification that you still might have. Jennifer, Hector is asking, how much wider will White Oak Bayou become?
Right, so Gary and I kind of talked about this earlier, but just depending on where you are in the along the channel, it varies. So it just depends. There's some sections where it's more narrow, depending on our right of way and the proximity the channel is to some of these detention basins that are already in place. And it varies from FM 1960 all the way down to Tidwell, but it's all expanded within our right-of-way limits.
Thank you, Jennifer. Now, just want to remind folks at home as well that we're talking about the White Oak Federal Project. So we are getting some questions about other efforts in the White Oak Bayou Watershed. We will answer all of those questions after the meeting, but we do encourage you to go to our website and look at White Oak Bayou Watershed, look at the White Oak Bayou Watershed page, and then once you get there, you'll be able to see a list of all of our active projects in that watershed. And Jennifer, I'll go to you now and wanted you to kind of go over some of the environmental considerations that are being taken into, we're undertaking with this project.
Sure. So with this project, like all of our flood control projects, we have to do what's called environmental due diligence. And that's us, surveying the area for any threatened and endangered species, or any other environmental things that could be impacted as part of this project. And if we were to run into any of those things, then we would have to follow all regulatory guidelines, be it from the Corps or another environmental agency or entity, and make sure that we're doing everything we can to make sure we're protecting what already exists within the area. And so we did that with this project.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Gary, we got another question about the Inwood meeting, someone saying that they received a meeting notice about that and wondering if they need to attend that meeting as well.
Yeah, the Inwood meeting, which is next Tuesday night, is that's about the Inwood Forest Detention Basin. That's a joint venture between the City of Houston and the and Harris County Flood Control. And the city of Houston basically made an application and got a grant to complete that project. That meeting on Tuesday, they're going to talk about the specifics of that project rather than where we've been talking about what we're doing along White Oak Bayou. That's going to talk specifically about the detention basin at Inwood Forest.
Right. Thank you, Gary. Now we've received all right. Next one is for Gary. And Gary, Jeff is asking where he can find more specific design details.
Don't know what in terms of specific design details. I mean, we've got a lot of detailed drawings that we've got on these projects. There's literally hundreds of sheets of drawings that we've got. If that's the kind of details you're looking at, one particular drawing doesn't really help somebody look at it. Usually when we're looking at the drawings, there's multiple sheets you got to be looking at the same time. So it's not something we usually, give out to the public. If you want them, you're going to have to request them, and we'll have to get them to you. But usually not one sheet will be able to help individuals on what it is. If you got specific questions, we could answer them. But specific design details is a pretty broad question.
Okay. Gary, Linda wants to know if this project will alleviate flooding past Tidwell to Interstate 10.
Most of the benefits for this project, as we showed on the one slide, it shows the range of lowering the base flood elevation. So the benefits for this project are really in this reach, is from the Coles Creek up to FM 1960, a little bit further north than 1960. And Jennifer had mentioned earlier on, we can't, and I think I said it in my slide too, is that when we do projects, we can't impact people downstream. And the same thing is it's hard to have benefits downstream of where you're doing a project, unless you're storing all the water that falls in that area in big, large detention basins. What we're striving to do here is try to move the water out, but at the same time, our detention basins, as part of the federal project, store some of that stormwater. We can only do two things with water in Harris County, and that's either move it down the channel faster, down to the Houston Ship Channel out to Galveston Bay, or store it on a temporary basin in our detention basins. And we only store it for 24 to 48 hours, so that 100-year storm, that's what we're looking at. So there's no real benefit downstream. We've had the struggle with this project is doing this project and not impacting anything downstream. We can't put water downstream on people. So the benefit starts out is basically at zero at the downstream end. Most of the benefit, it gets greater as you get around the Jersey Village area, and then it peters out as you get on the upper end of the project.
Okay. Thank you, Gary. Our next question is for Jennifer, and we mentioned this a little bit earlier, Jennifer, about any concerns with any kind of construction inconveniences. Can you talk more about the construction activities and when work will be performed?
Sure. And Gary talked about this, but our upstream portion from FM 1960 to Hollister is already underway. And so with these tight construction windows, we have very tight schedules that the contractors have to meet. So they're likely going to be stationing at multiple locations along the bayou at any time, and even more so once the downstream section from Hollister to Tidwell goes underway at the early point of next year. So we'll have all of the hike and bike trails closed along the channel, and that's for the safety of the public as well as the safety of the contractor in order for him to do his work efficiently. And there'll be interim, one-lane closures along some of the bridges as needed. You won't see as many road impacts outside of some of those locations, and of course there will be more dump trucks. It is an excavation site, but they will be required to follow all safety protocols and all local noise ordinances and things of that nature.
Thank you, Jennifer. And Gary, Cliff is asking what project will be done to improve the capacity of White Oak Bayou through Inwood Forest subdivision near Antoine.
Okay, that's the project we're talking about. That's the 5-mile section from Tidwell up to the Hollister Basin. That includes the area that Cliff is talking about, Inwood Forest area. The channel will be getting a little bit wider and a little bit deeper through that area, and that's going to be helping increase the capacity through that area. The detention basins upstream are also part of the project and help reduce the risk of flooding even in that area downstream at Inwood Forest area.
All right, thank you, Gary. We have, let's see, a couple more minutes. We're going to extend our meeting a little bit so we can take some more of your questions and comments. And I'll let you know just how you can submit those. You can submit a comment on this site in the box near the presentation live stream. You can submit a comment on the Flood Control District's website, and that is hcfcd.org/C14. Or you can submit a comment via phone at 855-925-2801. Utilize meeting code 8508. And again, if you're joining us by phone tonight, you'll want to press *3 to leave a message. And I do want to let you know that any questions or comments that were not answered tonight, we're going to be able to reach out to you at the close of the comment period. And there will also be a recording of this live stream that's going to be on our website, and it'll also be available on our YouTube page as well for your convenience. We will take another question. And Gary Fred is asking, will there be any bayou blockages next spring when we could expect heavy rains, excuse me?
No, the part of the contract terms and conditions with the contractors that we've got, if we know there's a rain event coming, and we usually got a little bit of heads up before a rain event's coming. If the contractor's got some work that he's doing in the bayou, he's responsible for removing any kind of blockages. And sometimes they put what we call low water crossings across the bayou. They'll have to remove those where they have a pipe in the very bottom of the channel, or they're diverting water off to one side, or whatever they've got to do in order to get some of the work done. So any type of blockages that are temporary of nature in construction, they have to remove those before we expect any heavy rains. And, we usually know, we usually have enough warning that we're giving the contractors to say, heads up, it's, we've got a rainstorm coming, or it's a heavy rain coming, or a tropical storm here happened, during the summertime when we know so we're keeping abreast of that. So even though construction is going to be working on many different fronts, we don't expect it to big, any kind of blockages where you go from where you have part of it finished and part of it not finished. The water will usually go right past those types of constrictions if there's any constrictions in there. So should not be.
All right, thank you, Gary. And I know we've mentioned it before, but questions that keep coming in, a question that keeps coming in is the construction schedule. Of course, people want to know when certain projects are going to happen and kind of where we are with the work right now.
Take that one is that basically we've broken up the channel work into two main contracts, and we've got the downstream one, which is we still have to get out the bid, and we're expecting that process. So we have the contractor starting early next year. That contract says he's got to be done by the end of 2021 in number of days of the calendar days. A little bit weather dependent in terms of how many days. If he gets a lot of wet days, he gets additional time, but in general, we're trying to get him done by the end of 2021. Same goes with the upstream channel segment, which is longer, as you can see on the map. We started him earlier, and so he's got a, so to speak, a head start, but that's also got additional work. He's got a lot more trail work up there that's got to be done as compared to downstream. And again, there's a certain amount of days he's got in the contract, and those number of days are trying to get him to be done by the end of 2021. We've got a really wet summer. He's not going to get done by the end of 2021, but if he gets a pretty dry summer and he's getting his work done, he should be able to get done by the end of 2021. We haven't made an impossible schedule, but we've made a very, as Jennifer says, a tight schedule where the contractor, he's got to have his means and methods on how he does it. He may have, we don't know how many different crews he's got. There's crews that put in pipes. There's crews that put in the concrete paving that we've got to do underneath the bridges. He'll have crews doing trails. He'll have crews excavating the dirt that has to be done. And he'll have crews putting in rock. So there's lots of different areas to work. And we want the contractor to work. There's no limitations on where he can or cannot work on the upstream element. The same thing with the downstream element. So that's why, one of the things Jennifer mentioned and I mentioned is that we're closing the trails through the section of work because the contractor is going to be working here and there. And he said, well, this part of the trail might be open. And, we don't see anything. Well, you might be able to work, to see that little bit of trail, but you go around the corner and the trail's all ripped up. So we're not allowing the trail to be a restraint for them. We're saying you could shut the trails, get your work done, get it done as fast as you can. We want you to be done by the end of 2021 and get it done and then get all the trails opened up.
And Jennifer, let's see. Catherine is asking, when will the trails be closed?
So Gary really just covered that pretty well. As he said, there could be a small portion of the trail while the contractor's working that, you glance over at it and it appears fine to walk down or bike down. But then just around the corner, there could be a giant hole in the trail, and that's a huge safety issue. And so as far as when the trails will be closed, the upstream portion is underway. So the contractor is in the process of going to all the different cul-de-sacs and different areas where you could enter into the trails for that portion of the project from FM 1960 all the way to Hollister. So he's in the process of closing that, as Gary said a little bit earlier in the presentation. We've already started the excavation work in that area. So they're going to be closing all those trails. I would be surprised if they weren't closed all before the end of the year. Now, as far as the section from Hollister to Tidwell, that project is going to be advertised very soon, and we're going to start construction early next year. And so once we award that contract and the contractor is able to get his notice to proceed, then he's going to do the same thing there. And he's going to close all the different portions and entryways along the trail. And he'll close it for the whole time during construction. And, we have an expedited schedule, so we're trying to get it done as quickly as possible so it can be open to the public and fully built.
And just to add to that question, Jennifer, Catherine also wants to know who the contractor is on the downstream trail, and if there are concerns to residents, contact the contractor or contact the flood control district.
So that portion of the project has not been advertised yet. So we do not have a contractor assigned yet, but once that all goes to Commissioner's Court, and it will be public record once that contract is awarded. So you'll be able to see that. And I believe the website gets updated as well. So you'll know all the details. And typically he'll post a job site board and have all the information there.
All right. Thank you, Jennifer. And with that, we will close. Wow, a lot of great information tonight and a lot of great questions and comments coming in from you at home. We certainly appreciate it. And I do want to let you know that we will continue to accept your comments and your feedback on this project through the close of the comment period, and that's going to be December 17th. But of course, we welcome all of your engagement throughout the duration of this project's life cycle. Also want to throw a quick reminder out there to everyone and encourage you to get flood insurance, as we know that flood season is year-round in Harris County. Again, we have a great deal of information for you on our website for your reference, including links so that you can rewatch this evening's meeting. I do want to thank you again for joining us this evening and really appreciate all the engagement that you're giving us on this project. And we look forward to continuing to share updates as our work moves forward. Stay safe and have a great evening.